Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you've ever had a discussion about gender identity, you've probably heard someone say, there are only two genders, it's basic biology. What they mean is that certain biological characteristics determine gender, and that these gender categories are so rigid that they exclude the possibility that trans and non-binary people exist. When people provide evidence for the idea that there are only two genders, they often cite introductory science textbooks. When I see people doing this, I'm pretty sure that their main goal is not to make an argument, but rather their goal is to belittle their opponent. Occasionally, though, you'll meet people who earnestly say, I don't understand this whole idea of being transgender. In elementary school, we all learned that boys have XY chromosomes and girls have XX chromosomes. I thought that that's basic biology. Can you explain this stuff to me? If you're one of those people, or if you're just somebody who wants to learn a new way to respond to that question, this video is for you. Now, I'm not a trans person, so I can't tell you firsthand what the trans experience is like. But I am somebody who took those same 8th grade biology classes as you probably did. And I'm somebody who learned to rethink gender during my adult life. I'm also someone who has teaching experience. So when I see people cite elementary school textbooks, it makes me think that they don't understand what the purpose of those textbooks is. So today, I want to take a closer look at the way we teach students about sex and gender. To show the error of the slogan, there are only two genders, it's basic biology, I'm going to make two big points. Point 1. Elementary school science textbooks contain intentional lies. Now you might be thinking, lies? In textbooks? For children? You must be kidding. This might surprise you at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you've noticed this, but children don't know anything. So teachers have to slowly guide children to knowledge, sometimes by stretching the truth or by oversimplifying things. In teaching, this technique is sometimes called a lie to children, or a useful fiction. And you're probably familiar with quite a few examples. For instance, the Bohr model of the atom is partly a lie. For 8th graders, it gives you a basic idea of what an atom is like. But when you get beyond 8th grade, you'll learn that it's a caricature. Electrons don't whiz around the nucleus of an atom like planets around the sun. That would almost be too perfect of a coincidence. But it's a nice analogy to help people who don't know about atomic physics yet. A well-written textbook will avoid explicitly stating a lie. A good author will say something that's technically true, but just incomplete. For example, some math textbooks will say that when you take the square root of a negative number, there's no solution. Carefully written textbooks will say that there's no real solution, anticipating the rest of your education. In Algebra 2, you'll learn that there is a solution, but it's not a real number, it's an imaginary number. Now, some examples of lying to children in class are not so innocent. Your teacher might have told you that Columbus discovered America, but we know that that's a harmful lie because it frames Columbus as a heroic explorer instead of as somebody who committed genocide. By the way, America wasn't really discovered by anyone because there were people already living here. And anyway, Leif Erikson beat Columbus to the punch by like 500 years. Lies to children are meant to be built upon later. So if they ingrain a harmful idea, they're not really serving their purpose. Now back to the main point. Elementary school textbooks will often say, boys are born with XY chromosomes and girls are born with XX chromosomes. But the textbook isn't stating an immutable truth of biology. It's oversimplifying because teaching kids about chromosomes is a nice introduction to teaching them about reproduction. If the student continues to study biology, they'll eventually learn about intersex traits and the psychological and social phenomenon of gender, as well as the physical, but still murky, concept of sex. So when someone says, there's only two genders, it's basic biology, you could say, yeah, I guess that is sometimes taught in basic biology, but that's biology made simple. You know, for children. Elementary school science textbooks are not meant to present truths beyond all doubt. They're meant to give students the first rung of a ladder that they can climb to attain higher knowledge. Once they've attained higher knowledge, they might even kick that ladder away because they don't need it anymore. Now, if you're interested in learning some advanced biology, I'd recommend checking out Sex and Gender, Biology in a Social World by Fausto-Sterling. Or you can read one of the many essays by Julia Serano, a biologist who also happens to be a trans person. But you might say, wait, isn't it bad that we don't teach young students about the complexities of sex and gender? Maybe oversimplifications about gender are some of those harmful lies that we talked about earlier. What if there's students in the class who are intersex, or students in the class who are questioning their gender identity? Shouldn't they get to learn about the modern day scientific consensus about sex and gender? And I'd actually agree with you. Which brings me to point 2. Elementary school science textbooks require revision. I frankly think it's embarrassing to cite an elementary school science textbook in an argument with an adult. However, there is a deeper underlying point to the appeal to elementary school. When people say there are only 2 genders, it's basic biology. They're saying that the basics can't change. And when the basics do change, the same people perceive that as a hostile takeover. They might even accuse the scientists as altering the truth in order to seem nice. Now, I don't like what this objection implies, because in my opinion, being nice is good, actually. But the scientific content of elementary school textbooks doesn't change merely because the scientists want to seem nice. Textbooks do change when the scientific community learns new things and decides how best to communicate those things. They don't change just because the libs complained. Interestingly, it's often conservatives who want to change science textbooks to match their personal beliefs. I'm referring to the conservative push to get creationism taught alongside evolution in schools. And I'm referring specifically to Kitzmiller versus the Dover Area School District, a court case from the mid-2000s. The Dover School Board wanted to assign students a biology textbook that taught intelligent design, a theory that nature is so well designed that it must have been created by an intelligent being like God. The school board was trying to argue in court that intelligent design was just as scientific as the theory of evolution, and they cited numerous people with PhDs. So was intelligent design actual science? Well, that's a very hard thing for a court to decide. Luckily, they didn't have to theorize some philosophical definition of science. Instead, the idea that intelligent design was science was debunked by expert witnesses like Kenneth Miller. If you've ever taken AP Bio or a college-level biology class, you might have actually used one of Miller's intro textbooks. Miller argued that the theory of intelligent design was based on ideas like irreducible complexity, ideas that are not accepted by the scientific community and that are popularized by creationists. Unable to refute Miller's points, Dover lost the court case. Intelligent design is not science, but rather cleverly disguised religion that doesn't belong in textbooks. Miller is Catholic, and he doesn't see any contradiction between believing in God and believing in science. To me, the guy's kind of a role model. Not because I agree with his religious views, but because I respect his commitment to reasoning through things. I'm sure he was raised with very traditional religious views, but he revised his beliefs when he encountered new evidence, and he encountered new evidence because he was curious. I hope that one day elementary school science textbooks are revised to explain the biology of sex and gender in a way that includes trans and non-binary people. But even then, there will probably be oversimplifications. So at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to teach yourself a bit about these things, and you're going to have to learn from others as well. New ideas about gender might seem counterintuitive at first, but that's part of the learning process. Over time, you might look back on your old beliefs as the ones that are counterintuitive. Learning is supposed to be a lifelong process, and if you're brave enough, you might learn something about yourself along the way. Of course, this is just advice for those of you who are curious. Whether you care to learn or not, you should respect the rights of trans and non-binary people, and try your best to see that those rights are protected. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if all of us fully understand the biology of sex and gender. Trans and non-binary people are already part of our communities, and their existence doesn't depend on what a science textbook says. So I say we learn more about the problems these communities face and see if we can help. That might require us to relearn some things that we learned as a kid, but mostly it just requires having an open mind and a willingness to change it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.